Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and today our guest in the studio is Guy Smith. Hi Guy.
Hello.
So Guy, something happened to you, didn't it? You were about 21 years old and you had a complete and permanent reorganisation inside. So what led up to that?
Well, I'd been trying to meditate for some time with a friend of mine who got interested in meditation. And we used to go to the woods behind where we lived and attempt to do it. But we hadn't had any lessons or whatever. So we really didn't know what we were doing. But I think both of us had always had an interest in something else. But had grown up in quite a materialistic culture. So I think I really longed for there to be a different dimension to life that I hadn't experienced. And then it was in about sort of soon into my second year of university. I was actually recently in my first love relationship, and I don't think that's a coincidence for some reason, just because I think there's a connection. But I was on my holiday, and my friend wasn't around this time. And I was following the meditation instruction to go in that I'd heard before, and I never understood where do you go if you go in. I mean, as far as I knew, there was just the brain, but for some reason this time, something seemed to happen. I was just sitting on my bed, I had my eyes closed, back at my parents' house, and it was like something moved. I can't really say what moved, but somehow it was like, I could say it seemed like consciousness moved in relation to my body. But that's even a bit conceptual. The experience of it was just that there was suddenly this very smooth, open reality that seemed to have appeared in the middle of my body, or that I suddenly found. So I continued to sit there with my eyes shut, and I gradually noticed this kind of fluttering movement, which was something I could sort of see and feel, and then there was even a kind of like a hissing kind of sound. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating, and I didn't want to risk opening my eyes because I thought I might kind of scare it away or lose it. So I just stayed there really fascinated for a long time. I didn't know how long it was. And the intensity of it grew. There was more sort of a shaking quality. And it was just like a smooth openness that didn't at all fit with my previous experience of life as a very material thing. It was very smooth and open. And then eventually I decided to open my eyes, and there was this shaking energy all around. And it was just wonderful. Like the room seemed to be sort of buzzing with an energy that was either there before and I'd never noticed it, or it was happening now I didn't know at the time. And it was really lovely. I just felt so happy and content for the first time in my life without any reason to be, without any, just being alive felt wonderful in that moment. And I had sort of tears of relief, and so yeah, that was a real change, because suddenly I was aware there's something else in life that I had no idea about before.
So how did that change your outlook on life?
Well, I think before then life had felt a little bit depressing. I really didn't know what I wanted to do as a career, and just the thought of having a career, having a wife, having kids, having a house, earning money. And I had been a Catholic in the past, so there was some thought that when I died I might get a reward for it. But it seemed a long way off at the age of 21. It still, hopefully, is a long way off. So to kind of go on an act of faith for whatever, 60, 70, 80 years, and for me that always felt very oppressive, but I didn't know an alternative until this happened. So it was very liberating, and it made me think, well, I want to find out more about this, and I want to experience this as much as possible because it's really lovely, and to find out, what it implies and all of those things.
So that was really, the experience was the beginning of a journey of discovery and understanding, in effect.
It was.
It's interesting because you were telling me earlier
Yes.
that it was very similar to something that happened at 3 years old.
Yes, that's right. It was funny because I had this experience when I was 3, and I remembered it stayed in my mind for maybe a couple of years afterwards. But then I forgot about it. But this experience when I was 21, it kind of seemed to loop me back to that experience. So while I was having this experience, I suddenly remembered that experience, but it felt almost like a connection sort of through time, or in spite of time.
It was the same kind of essence reappearing somehow, possibly.
Yes, I think exactly. And that was, I was, I'd had my 3rd birthday. I'm guessing it was 3 because I know it was before school. And that's my feeling, it's 3, maybe it was 4, but it was very young. And it was the day after my birthday, and I remember just the thought occurred to me, well, if I'm 3, that means that 4 years ago I didn't exist. I don't think I even knew the word exist at that age. So I would try to explain to my dad what I was saying, and he got it, and he said, "Yeah, no, you didn't, you didn't exist then." And right then, I was suddenly aware of this again, a sort of buzzing energy that at that time it felt very ancient. It had an ancient feel to it, and it felt very familiar. And I think something that was quite important for me in that experience was that persuaded me to have my own perspective back then. So I thought, okay, that doesn't tally with what my dad's saying. This seems quite real. So I just kept my thoughts to myself. And obviously in the course of time I then forgot all about that. So this experience kind of looped me back into that, and it was quite nice to rediscover something from the past.
What I'm kind of looking for here is more a clarification of how that experience challenged especially when you're older, 21, you say it set you on a path of understanding and discovery.
Yes.
So was it just that it was a nice experience, or was it triggering something deeper? Was it challenging something more fundamental about how you saw life?
Well, yeah, I mean, suddenly I didn't know what life was made of anymore. I thought it was pretty much material. It was just physical things.
Yes.
But now there was this fluttering energy and this openness that didn't really seem to fit in with, particularly with space and time. And because it felt lovely, that's why I wanted to really get to the bottom of it, what is it? And this feels really good for me. I'm sure it must be good for other people too. Why is it not more talked about or known about?
So it does seem the experience was a gentle experience. Some people talk about something which is much more, hits them much harder, is much, use the word devastating sometimes, but that wasn't the case for you. It was kind of something that was beautiful, and in its own way quite seductive, because you wanted to find out more so you could be in this space more, because it was more pleasant, if you like.
Absolutely, yeah.
So to tell us a bit more about how that exploration manifested, what did you check out?
Most of my connections came through my friend, because he was the one who started to look. So, and he particularly got into Osho. So I read quite a lot about Osho and listened to tapes. And then also other people that I heard Osho mention, like Ramana, Krishnamurti and Gurdjieff. So I would read a lot of their books and continue to practice going in. So it was sort of reading around generally. And I think at the time I thought that those people were all saying identically the same things. It was only sort of later that I came to kind of, well, actually, what's the kind of differences and what are the similarities there?
And I know one of the things, again, you told me was that interesting thing is after you had this experience at 21, you actually you got more committed to doing your university work. It's not as if you blissed out and became, you started ignoring life as such. It took you more into the practical things of life.
It did in terms of university work because there was room to be very creative. You know, I literally studying, I had 6 hours a week study and that was it, and we had to write an essay every 2 weeks. So there was loads of time for me to think about things and to read literary texts and to really enjoy the texts and think about all the implications. So I wrote lots of my essays and I would quote bits of, you know, Taoism or tantric philosophy or whatever I was into at the time and try and kind of link it to the texts. And in some ways that didn't go down well because the idea is you're usually supposed to use philosophers that are linked to the same time as the writers. But I seem to get away with it largely, and I think it's because, you know, I now had this real passionate interest in reality and people, and so, you know, I wanted to write the essays because it helped me to think about life in different perspectives. Whereas before I think I was trying to do what I thought I was supposed to do or trying to figure out what the tutors wanted. So it was liberating in that regard that I could just do what I was interested in, and by and large it went down quite well.
So you checked out Roger Linden and Tony Parsons and other non-dual teachers. What did you feel you got from them?
Well, it's interesting. At the time it was very, I was very into that area. But now I feel almost like I've looped back to where I was again before at 21 and 3, but with something else. So, and I find it quite difficult to talk about non-duality in that time, and even if I read books or watch programs, something happens in me which I don't particularly like anymore. I think that that take on non-duality is very it's very direct and it's very full-on, and I think I quite like that spirit. It was very it felt very radical, and so I think that I enjoyed the effects it had on me. It had quite spectacular effects on my consciousness and sort of turned many different thoughts over. You know, they would say things like there's no inside or outside, or no space and time.
So you could connect with this from the space that you were in, from your experiences you'd had?
Yes, I mean, I would go to the meetings and then I would have lots of strange, energetic experiences and my perception doing all weird things. And so I thought, for me, that would really hit the nail on the head because it had such a strong impact. So it certainly had a value for me, but I think as I went on, I found other things that to me felt more good for me. And because they felt more good for me, I thought, well, there's a lot of reality in that. If something feels good, I think that means there's reality there.
But meantime, you wrote a book.
Yes.
Which is called This is Unimaginable and Unavoidable, Irresponsible Writings on Non-Duality, forward by Tony Parsons, which was actually within the non-dual circle sold quite well, quite well received. And I read part of it the other night. It's actually quite an uncompromising book. Do you feel that now? It's quite uncompromising.
Yeah, it was very much in the same spirit of non-duality as I found it in the scene with Tony and Roger. And it had that, yeah, it definitely had that spirit. And I mean, I enjoyed writing it a lot because I wasn't writing it as a book for other people to read. I was just enjoying these new strange experiences I was having and wanting to try and put them down. But now it's strange to look at a little bit because I feel like I'm looking at it from a different world almost. Yeah.
So basically, you had the experience. You felt the non-dual world. You explored the non-dual world, but something wasn't quite adding up. Is that right? In terms of to talk more about that. What you
sure.
started to feel.
Well, I wasn't all that at ease in myself as a somebody living a life and socializing and working and so on. I've often felt very uncomfortable, and I think that's because I had sort of symptoms of, from past events that were still with me, but I didn't know about that at all.
So let's get this clear. So you were in the non-dual space, and you felt very blissful a lot of the time. You felt the connectedness of oneness. Is that right?
That's right.
And then at that, when you were feeling that, what was your relationship with your body at that point?
I don't think I had much of a relationship with my body. I think probably my body wasn't really in the picture, and I hadn't thought that it would be, because sometimes people would talk about that life, a common phrase in Advaita is that you are not the body. And while I think there's some truth in that, I think the effect of hearing that was to very much take me out of my body. So in a way, out of my body, it was very easy to experience a oneness, but something was missing. I think my body was protesting. I actually lost a lot of weight after sort of around the time I was writing that book. So something felt not quite right to me.
So something didn't feel quite complete. Is that fair to say that?
Yeah, that would be fair to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the confusing thing was there was no promises that that non-duality had anything to do with a good state or not. So at the time, I think I probably thought, well, that's just life, or there's nothing I can do about that. And there were lots of phrases like that, and for me that, just something inside my body, inside me, wasn't satisfied. I don't think I was all that conscious about it, but somehow I found myself going towards other things.
Okay, because what a lot of the Advaita teachers, and maybe you yourself at one point, said that there's no one there, so there's no motivation to in fact take care of the body. It doesn't mean to say you don't take care of it, but there's no one particularly taking care of it. Is that what you felt at the time?
That's what I believed at the time, and I thought it wasn't a belief. I thought it was self-evident. All the evidence showed there isn't any kind of self. But now, to me, the evidence tells me that there is a self, and that's a healthy thing. It's not an innately cut off, separate, lonely thing. It's.
So how do you see then your relationship to non-duality now?
Well, interestingly, I sort of think more in terms of, I tend to sort of bypass it a little bit and go back to where I was beforehand. And I told you about the experience I had at 21, and then I had other experiences after. And that over time, that had settled into a sense of almost that I could experience oneness, the oneness of life, in a kind of internal way, particularly sort of in my body. And there was almost a paradox of that, is that the more I was in touch with my body, which is a very individual thing, everybody's body is different, the more I could sense the oneness of life.
So it took also being in touch with your body to feel the depth more of the oneness of life.
Yes, and it was in a different way. I mean, so now I would, I feel it mostly sort of in my body, which is a hard thing to explain because bodies seem to be very separate looking. And for me, it's important to emphasize that too, that actually, as a body, I'm distinct from other things. And that feels very healthy to acknowledge that, whereas before I would have said that's just an appearance. It's not really true. It's
okay.
Whereas now, to me, it feels very real, and it gives me a sort of stability to feel very solid and present.
And also, I'm just looking at my notes I made from our previous conversations. You didn't like the power inequality between the non-dual communicator and who they were talking to. Again, something off for you there.
I mean, this I think for me just reflects the general view in the spirituality scene. But obviously, in more traditional circles, it's been very explicit. You know, you have a guru, and then you have disciples. That's quite a common setup. Whereas in non-duality, that was downplayed, and I liked that. But somehow, I still did feel that the person at the front knew what they were talking about, and everybody else's experience was wrong unless it matched theirs. And for me now, I'm much more interested in what's different people's experience, and not having these kind of pyramid structures.
You also, at one point, used the word, when we were talking beforehand, about integrity. You felt there was that the integrity wasn't as complete as it could have been.
Yeah, I like the word integrity because it means a wholeness of structure. So I think if I feel very whole in myself, then I feel very equal to another person, because I think an organism, me as an organism, is not higher or lower than you or any other walking around. So, but often I see these sort of power struggles, and you get them. I mean, you get them everywhere. You get them in psychotherapy training too. You get them in many structures in society.
Every aspect of life, there's a power struggle.
There is.
Yeah.
And people trying to have a bit more power, and or other people giving away their power. And I seem to feel happiest when I relate to people as an equal.
Yeah. So tell me more about how this journey was about becoming more in tune, if you like, or rediscovering, what do you call it, with your body.
Yes.
And more, in fact, what it meant in simple terms, you were listening more to your body, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, when I was feeling discomfort, I then decided to explore psychotherapy, and I went into a talk psychotherapy. Most psychotherapy is still quite verbal. And so I was looking, because I noticed it was particularly seemed to be in relationships with other people or in groups of people that I felt these kind of symptoms of discomfort and feeling frightened or angry or disconnected. And for me, the talk psychotherapy, I did it actually for 3 years, and I saw clients for 3 years, and it's a very demanding thing to do. But I actually didn't feel a huge amount of benefit for myself in that training. So I decided to take a gap year, and I for some reason I was drawn to something like body psychotherapy, which comes from a different tradition. So I did some training in something called biodynamic massage, which is one practice of a biodynamic psychotherapist. And that's biodynamic is one school of body psychotherapy. And it took me a while, but with these kind of treatments, I started to feel, a common statement I heard was that you are the body. And I thought, God, that's such a different view. And I sort of started to feel like I wasn't sort of located in my head anymore, or located even out of my head. I started to feel, I'm as much sort of in my legs or my chest or my fingers as I am in my head. And that was really pleasurable, and it was also very grounding. And it gave me the equality too, because no longer was I sort of a disembodied mind trying to out-argue other people. I felt very connected to other people, just as bodies and other
Brought you
mammals.
more into your human realm somehow,
It
by
did,
the sound of it.
absolutely, yeah.
And how was that in terms of, it's almost like a kind of, you discover the ultimate, and so you're living in a non-dual world, and that in itself brings a certain security, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
It isn't why you go
Yeah.
there, but because you know this is the answer to life, and then you're discovering, well, actually, that in itself is not the complete picture for you. That's not the complete picture. Discovering other dimensions of how your picture is.
Yes.
How was that for you?
Well, it was not. It was actually very. I had a sweetness to it and a humbleness to it. It was quite nice to be just a person without the truth with a capital T. It was quite nice to be just someone with my own experience to share. It was a relief in some ways, and it felt very real to me. And I think it engaged me with life a lot more, because I thought, well, actually, I am this animal, basically, living a life. I'm connected to the world. I feel a responsibility and a pleasure at trying to help make things go well and change things that aren't going so well. So really, it brought me back into contact with other people, and into myself and my feelings, and yeah, it was a really lovely experience. Like, literally I felt a lot warmer in my body. My body became more coordinated, and I was able to listen to people better and to say my own thoughts and feelings better to other people.
So where are you with it all now? Do you feel you're on the journey, or do you feel you found a new balance, or?
Yeah, I certainly feel I have a new balance. I have a really strong sense of feeling oneness as almost like there's an internal oneness to all things. So I feel that inside my body, but also an awareness of the distinctness of things in life. I'm still integrating things. I mean, there's a lot to integrate. I mean, even just knowing this interview was coming out, but it made me revisit my past and think, well, actually, how do I see that now, or how does that fit? So I see my life as about connecting with other people and trying to live authentically. I think the more I feel embodied, the more authentic I need to be. So it's, in a way, it's about sort of actually how do I see things in a intuitive way, rather than before. I think I had quite a lot of views installed in my head that I'd taken in externally, and for me it's just about what do I actually think.
Is there more to go? Did you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sort of keep a notebook, and I'm always sort of writing notes down, and then I'm discussing with friends, and I'm practicing. I have clients, and I practice myself, and I'm working on myself. So yeah, I think I will continuously be seeking to be more myself and more in my body and more authentic and connected to other people.
What would you say to somebody who was going to non-duality meetings on a regular basis and they weren't happy with their life? Because I think everyone that goes there is going to, in one way, want to go to get something. I know the standard line is you don't get anything here, but everyone realises they're going because their life somewhere isn't complete or perfect or peaceful, whatever. What would you say to someone that's going to those lectures regularly now and reading non-duality books, or even what would you say to someone now that picked up this book and read it?
It's quite tricky because I think it's important that people follow what feels right for them. And I would just say that just to keep questioning and looking into. I think when you're in a meeting, it's very powerful what somebody's saying, and it can be, especially if you have nice experiences, you can take some things for granted and not necessarily explore things yourself. So I just encourage them to say, okay, is it really, 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 really true for me? And I would also share with them that for me, the thing that's actually been made life kind of rich and lovely has been very much about becoming more embodied and actually becoming a separate person in a way. I don't think I really was a separate person before. But I mean a person as a body rather than a sort of mental idea about myself. And I'd want to share that with them, that actually that's given me the most sense of grounding and pleasure in life. And also it's enabled me to experience the spiritual aspect of life in a very sweet, kind of grounded way that again for me has been more valuable for me.
What's your understanding of who you are now, of the I that you feel is you?
Well, in the simplest way, I would say that I am this thing sitting here, which I see as a body. I could use lots of different words: a body, mind, or an organism, or a living creature. Which could sound like it's materialistic. It could sound going straight back to there's just matter, and then when you die, there's nothing, and so on. But for me, actually, when I've really felt in my body, that's when I really feel most a sense of wholeness, which doesn't fit really with a materialistic theory, which tends to talk about lots of little bits. It's has a kind of a depth to it that doesn't fit with the idea that there's just a world and it's made of matter and it's going to fizzle out eventually. So I experience myself both as a body. I think that's quite a powerful statement to make, because most people experience themselves as minds who have bodies, but I would say I am a body. And inside that body, I can feel that there's a oneness to all things that I can connect to too. So it sounds like two selves, but that's not really how it feels.
Well, talk more about how you feel the oneness now. Or these days, I'm not talking about necessarily now, this moment, you can if you want, but these days, how you feel the oneness.
It feels like a sort of a calm warmth or a calm presence inside. I was just thinking, I'm constantly turning over things, so I'm sure I will say it differently even in a few days' time. But in Advaita, there's a popular image is that life is the ocean, and the self is the ocean waving, and if the wave starts to think it's a wave, then it gets disconnected from the ocean. For me, that kind of gives that sense that the self is illusory. Whereas I was thinking the other day that I preferred an image more like a forest, where the trees are sort of grow out of, and they're made of what's in the soil. But in a sense, they do have a full kind of separateness and integrity about their structure. They're not just illusions. They're solid, and there is a distinction. And obviously, at some point they break down and they sort of go back into the soil. So for me, it's a oneness that preserves an integrity and a separateness to things as well.
And does that guides you in your life? Do you feel?
Yeah, it makes me feel very free in a way, because I feel like a living body that is choiceful. I wouldn't so much say I have choice. It's not like a mental thing, but that my whole body and mind has the opportunity to make choices, and so that feels very alive for me. And in terms of the oneness, it just feels like a lovely, deep. It reminds me if I kind of lie on a. If I was to lie on a mountainside or go to the sea, there's often that very deep, calm, reassuring feeling. So that's how I tend to feel it these days.
Yeah. You happy with your life now?
Yes, very much. Yes, I have a lot to figure out in terms of exactly what I want to do. You know, I'm practicing as a body psychotherapist. I have things to say about spirituality. I'm interested in the dynamics and the inequality in society, and I want to sort of address that.
Yeah.
But that all feels very exciting. You know, the things that I love doing, and yeah.
Okay. Guy, thanks very much for coming along to talk to us on Conscious
Thank
TV, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.